Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Govs on the Go Alumni Edition, a podcast featuring alumni from the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. My name is Dr. Buzz Hoon. I'm the Dean of the college. I'm also the host of the podcast. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Shirley Layer, graduated with a degree in animation from the Department of Art and Design back in 2023. So it wasn't so long ago, but I think you have such a great story. I'm really looking forward to having everybody hear it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not so long ago at all, just about 6 months.
6 months. And so, Shirley, we're gonna kind of lay out all your what happened along the way, but let's tell everybody where you are and what's going on in your life.
Yeah. So actually right now I'm in my office/studio. And to be quite honest, I have taken a little break since August because the last 4 years have been pretty insane. But right now I'm actually working on a project, a local project where I'm helping with social media and designing and also like helping with workflow and systems. So that's something that I just started recently, the last few months. And then I'm actually working on, so before I came back to school, I had a business called Learn. And essentially it was about like connecting people. It was like YouTube, but in person. So connecting people in the community that had, knowledge and skills and just like information that you could learn from them, but like hands-on in a real world experience. And so when I went to school, I kind of left that alone for a little while, but I'm coming back to that. And so that's something that's kind of in the works because I'm really big about community. So I haven't said it publicly anywhere else, but I am working on like a community and maybe even kind of like an art house here locally to invite creators and different entrepreneurs to kind of collaborate and work on projects together. So that's something that I'm working on currently.
Wow. And all the things, all the skills that you have, I'm sure as you picked up along the way, those are things that I hear from people all the time about the need for the kind of things that you can bring to help a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Especially, in the time that we live in now, with as fast as technology is moving and with AI, which I know that that's a very controversial subject, but the world is moving very fast and we have to be able to keep up with it. And what I notice is that a lot of small businesses, they tend to stay behind. And so I have a big heart for small business. That's what I started when I started my design and printing business. I worked with small businesses and I actually work with them here in Clarksville with an organization called Local. So I'm really big about trying to help traditional businesses transition to this new age technology and kind of be that bridge for them.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about your life story. And you said you grew up in Clarksville, and what kind of things did you do? What kind of person was young Shirley?
Young Shirley was a wild spirit. She was literally running around barefoot outside all the time. So yeah, I grew up here in Clarksville, and I was just a very curious kid. And again, like I would run around with the neighborhood kids all day, just playing all kinds of games, going in the woods. I actually learned how to ride my bike with the neighborhood kids. I also was just very creative, right? So my mom, she actually bought me and my brother like these legitimate old school desks from like the 60s. And I just remember like sitting there for hours just drawing. And I was really big into Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z. And so I would sit there and just work on this artwork. And I think that was probably the first kind of nudge that told me like, oh, okay, maybe this is something I wasn't aware of. I knew that I would always do something creative as far as a career. I just didn't know what it was. But I think that was like the very first seed that was planted.
Yeah.
And then I also loved like making like, you know, remember the school spirit shirts, how you
Mm-hmm.
would paint them. And so I did that a lot. And I was always just very like able to be in a bunch of different groups of people. Like I was kind of a chameleon. Like I could talk to like the jocks and like the nerds and like, you know, the goths and, you know, all of these different communities of people. So yeah, like that was probably that's my young Shirley. And then 18 is when I ended up moving to Philly and kind of started that area of my life. So
But you also mentioned that you went to Rossview High School, so we'll give them a shout out. That's your first sort of taste of doing something with digital art.
yeah, so Rossview High School, that was when I started working at Hawk Advertising, which was like a magazine for the high school. And before then, I can't remember. I mean, we had a computer at home, and I think I might have used like MS Paint, but I'd never done anything real. And so I was in Miss Bryant's class. She was an awesome teacher. I love her. And that was the first time that I used Photoshop. And I think it was like Photoshop 6 or something. I don't even know what version it was. But I remember I had a Dodge Stealth, which at the time I was like 15, 16 years old. And it was kind of like that. It wasn't a sports car, but it almost was. And I ended up making like a movie poster or wannabe movie poster of me against the car. And I was just like completely mind blown. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what, you know, this is something that I could do. Um, and then I also was also part of like the track team and ultimate frisbee. So I've always been, you know, artistic and also like athletic. So that was kind of my experience, you know, at Rossview.
Oh, that's cool. That sounds like a very free spirit young person life.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you mentioned 1960s desk, I got a flashback that maybe it was one of my old grade school desks.
Yeah, who knows? Probably. It was great. I love the little cubby underneath and it was metal and really durable. So
Yeah. So after high school, you mentioned that you kind of explored some areas where you were a creator, also an entrepreneur, and were you just kind of exploring what kind of skills did you have? Were you looking to sort of to gain certain skills as you're going along? Or were you just kind of no real intention or plan, just kind of taking it as it comes?
yeah, there was no real intention. I remember when I moved to Philly, I was really just like I didn't know a lot of people, and so the only thing that I really immersed myself was in art and creating. And so I was working at a bakery for a little while, and they would create these amazing cakes, you know, with airbrush and fondant that I'd never seen before. And so I was like, huh, I wonder if I could, you know, paint a shirt with airbrush a shirt and just see what happens. So I did that. It didn't work. It wasn't good. But I ended up going back to painting, like I had in high school for like the school spirit. And so I was painting on shirts. This was actually before I knew I had to go to basic. So I had to wait a year for the tech school that was part of my job. So in that time, I just kind of tried a bunch of different things. And so eventually I was painting on shirts and it was like, you know, Sonic and Mario and very like commercial type of things, but people really liked it. And so they
Yeah.
started asking me, can you create this, you know, for me? And I was like, I guess I can. Now, mind you, it would take me hours. It would sometimes take me 16, 20 hours to paint a shirt. And I think I was charging like $50. So I didn't know anything about business. I wasn't profitable. But it at least kind of showed me like, oh, okay, this was something that I'd never thought about that could potentially turn into something. And then soon after I ended up deploying, or not deploying, I'm sorry, I went to basic. And so that kind of, you know, again, it was another seed that was planted in my head. And it wouldn't be until a couple of years later that I revisited that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you, first of all, are a keen observer of things, and then also internalizing, analyzing those things, and seeing how you can take your creative spirit, which you naturally came across, and just being able to see if you can adapt and make something brand new out of out of something like that. That's because I see that evident in what you do within your career. So you mentioned that you went to basics. You went to the Air Force Reserves,
Air Force,
and,
yep.
and so Again, what kind of impact do you think that had upon your life?
Honestly, it was huge. And I'll just be completely candid with you. When I moved to Philly, I moved without knowing basically anyone. Like I had just my friend from high school, and but I loved like how different it was. So the
Hmm.
city was a culture shock to me. But I did struggle. I went through some really hard times, and going to basic kind of just allowed me to start over from scratch. And I was what they call a dorm chief. So when you get there, you are assigned a job essentially, but you don't know what that job is. You don't know what it is until a couple of weeks later when you figure it out. And
Hmm.
so essentially, I was in charge of about 50 women. And I was one of the youngest. I was 19 at the time. And so basically, I was like the mini TI. So when our TI wasn't there, I was the one in charge. But I didn't know what that meant. So essentially, I kind of discovered my own like leadership abilities. And even to the point where, basic is 8 weeks long. And usually when you become a dorm chief or any job, you get demoted. Like they end up saying, okay, this person didn't fit that. We're going to switch them out. I ended up holding on to that position for the entirety of basic training. And I had to figure out like delegation, because, if there's 50 women, they can't all come to me. So I had to figure out, okay, well, I have these element leaders. So now I need to divide, these groups of women into these four separate element leaders, and then they are the ones that can. So it was kind of like management. So I really learned about leadership, management, and I also got to create the shirts, for design the shirts for our flight essentially. And then I also won PT excellence. So I got to run with the commander at the very
Nice.
end of the ceremony. So it taught me that I had these leadership skills inside of me that I just wasn't aware of before.
Yeah, you're finding your voice. You're also gaining confidence in yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So, how did you then get from you were in Philadelphia, you went to the Air Force Reserves, but how then do you transition to coming back to Clarksville and making eventually to Austin P?
So there a little bit that happened in between that time. So I came back from basic. And then I think I spent like a year, just kind of, I was doing on the job training, and then I ended up deploying. And then after I deployed, I started my design and printing business. And so I did that for about 3 years. And I'd never gone to school for business. I'd never gone to school for art. So everything that I learned was just hands-on experience and YouTube University, to be quite honest. And
Threw
it was
you to the
amazing.
deep end.
Yeah, right into the deep end. And it was amazing because there was I had three business partners, and they were very experienced with, the printing industry and design. So I was able to soak in all of that information from them. So that was just really incredible. And that was in 2012 when I started that business. And then, eventually businesses are never linear, just like life.
Yeah.
And we moved around like three different times, and eventually the business dissolved. I kept the license, I kept all of the equipment because I had invested a lot of it. And then eventually in 2016, I came back home because I just had to say, you know what, this didn't work out, and it's fine. So I ended up going back home, and in 2016, I realized that, okay, one of the reasons why I think I didn't succeed was because I didn't know anything about marketing. And this is when social media kind of started really being universally utilized, right, by the masses. And
Everybody wants
so,
it.
yeah, exactly, right. And so I really dove into social media marketing, and like, how do I create a YouTube channel, and why is it even important? So there was a time where I did that for a little while, and I ended up developing more skills. I was able to actually monetize a YouTube channel. And then at the same time, I was working with, different organizations and helping them to kind of promote themselves using different skills that I had learned. And so from 2016 to 2019, that's kind of what I did. I was just kind of trying to figure things out. And then in 2019 is when I came up with the idea for Learn. which I had talked about earlier. And I ended up going to, I started a podcast and I ended up going to Office Now. They're actually located on Wilma Rudolph. And that's where I met my friend Tanya, who had a gallery, an art gallery. And we became friends. She was also not in the military, but she was a military spouse. And she ended up telling me, like, hey, you have your GI Bill. Why don't you just use that to go back to school? Because one of the reasons why I created Learn was because I wanted to learn animation. And it was one of the few things that I just couldn't get with YouTube videos. I just could not grasp it. And so I was like, well, let me see if I can develop this business to find someone. And what ended up happening instead was I told her the only way I'd go back to school was if animation was offered as a major. And I was joking. And when I looked at Austin P, it just so happened to be the first year that it was offered. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm going back to school. Like, so it was pretty wild.
That was meant to be a
Meant to be.
partnership there that was meant to be.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So you come to Austin P and well, first of all, you talked about all the different things that you experienced, but I'm sure there was a transition time. To what kind of things do you remember from your early experiences of being on campus, being involved in some of the classes? Was it excitement? Was it joy? Was it what were your thoughts early on?
Yeah, so I'll be completely honest with you. I had no intentions of coming back to school, like none. Because at that point I was 28 years old. I had started my business. And so for me, when I thought about school, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to do tests and like, just kind of regurgitate this information and not really, not have as much freedom as I did when I was in business. And I was completely shocked. I was proven wrong. And I can only say that from my experience in the art department, but the amount of freedom that like when I was in my drawing class, right? Um, she would give us a lesson and but she would give us the opportunity to, you can draw whatever you want, like it's up to you,
Mm.
and then and so there was so like I had no professional training in art, right? And so there were just so many basics that I didn't know. I had no idea what foreshortening was. I didn't know what the principles of art and design were. I had nothing. And I could just see that even in the first year, and in the first year, I had no animation classes. So I was kind of like, oh, but the classes that I had were actually more fundamental because now I learned how to draw from shapes. That was something that I couldn't grasp before. So before I would always draw, um, try to be exact instead of just getting the form and drawing the lines. And so that was really amazing for me. And also at the same time, when I went back, I started vlogging my entire journey.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was really interesting. So there's this guy, he's an entrepreneur. His name is Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's really big in the entrepreneurial community. And this is when TikTok had really just kind of transitioned from what it was before, ByteDance. And so he was like, you need to get on there and you need to vlog and upload as many, videos as you can. So I took this as a way to do that and share my journey of going through these 4 years of college. And so that actually got a lot of traction. And I was just sharing all of the projects that I was working on. I even ended up, which I don't have him right. Well, actually, this character right here, his name is Sketch. So he's a character that I developed a few years ago. And so a lot of the projects that I did were involving him. And he was like my muse. And so, one of them was a stop motion paper animation that was for Form an Idea. And I absolutely love that. It was the first time I did any sort of stop motion animation. And it just kind of, again, planted the seed. And I knew that the rest of the time there was just going to be amazing.
Wow. Because I'm so glad that it worked right into your creative, independent spirit where, you have all these, you come in with all these skills, and I'm sure you have throughout your life always kind of thought, which is a natural kind of thing. I can just learn how to do this on my own, and here these things are coming to you and saying, giving you the form and the ability. And I think that was, I mean, the vlog thing is so interesting to me because I'm sure that, like many people, they didn't think about content. You need to provide content. People want to participate and hear other people's stories. That's what it's all about, sharing stories. And here you are. Now, was it hard to share so much of your experience? I mean, did you feel like at times that I don't feel like doing this today, or
Yeah, well, what's funny is, so at first I was trying to create content because that's what I thought I had to do is like, oh, okay. And I quickly realized like there's no way that I'm going to be able to create content while because I have to create for all of these classes. You know, there's some classes where I have to have 2 essays and there's all these deadlines. So I pivoted to just documenting. And that was much easier because
hmm,
I was already creating, right? And just like any artist, we're already making, so there's no, and something that Gary said was don't create, just document. And that stuck with me. And I said, huh, okay, well, let me do
yeah,
that. And so I would literally just film my entire day from start to finish, but it would be bite size. It would be a couple seconds here or there, and eventually it would be a minute long video. So it was following my entire day. And sometimes it was boring. Sometimes it was like, I'm just writing this essay or I'm doing this thing. And then other times it was really, really interesting. Like I'm drawing this entire, canvas and it took me 16 hours and here's the finished product. So switching my mind instead of creating to documenting was really helpful.
oh yeah, that's a great observation. So, you said one of the biggest opportunities that you had while you were here was the 24-hour animation contest. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that was such a cool experience. And I think that was in my sophomore year, I believe, so 2020. So me and a classmate, we actually had put together an animation club. And in October, they do the 24-hour animation contest. And it's been going on for years. I can't remember how many, it's like 20 something years. And so I was like, oh, this is a fantastic opportunity, like to just because at that point I wasn't taking any animation classes, I think. So that was the opportunity to jump in. And we needed 5 people. So we ended up getting five people. Most of them, 4 of them were from animation, and then the other one was from music. And it was so cool. She ended up bringing like a bunch of instruments, a violin and a saxophone and like all of these things. And so essentially the theme was, or the idea behind the 24-hour animation is you have 24 hours to create a 30-second animation. And they would give you a theme upon the starting time. So when we got there, we found out that it was about COVID. And so we were like, oh, because at that time we were all going through it, right? And so we kind of came up with this abstract kind of theme where it was about like a fennec fox in the desert and the storm comes. And it was really fun because everyone had something to contribute, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up vlogging that entire process. And we eventually did finish literally 1 minute before it was due. It was madness, but it was so much fun. Again, everyone was contributing, and then Ariana was making the score, and she had her instruments out, and Paul was creating the 3D, and Jeremy was doing the animatic and the animation, and I was making clouds and filming and trying to manage everything. And so a couple days later, or that next day, I posted the video, the vlog onto TikTok, and I crashed because we were up for 24 hours. I woke up the next day and it had over 3 million views.
Holy
And I was
cow.
like, oh my gosh, what is happening? So the video ended up going viral. We didn't win. We didn't win the
Yeah.
competition, but we did get recognized as like the behind the scenes, and I guess like people from Disney and Netflix, they had seen the video and it was just absolutely crazy.
Holy cow. So what was in that video, do you think that was so that you had made
Mhm.
that was so popular? Why what was it?
I think it's funny because I try to dissect it because I've
Uh-huh.
never had a video go that viral again. And so I think what was interesting was, the beginning of the video had a hook. So that first 3 seconds of the video, I told them, we're going to make an animated film in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Right. And immediately that's like, wait, what? You
Yeah.
know, and then I showed like, there's going to be execs from Disney and Netflix and Sony. So mentioning those big names. And then the video kind of goes into like me preparing to go to the school. And then I showed essentially like, this is our theme. And then the process that we took in order to create the actual film. So it was getting little snippets of everyone just working. And again, like Ariana had like these instruments. So that was just like really interesting. And then filming, Jeremy working on the animation and Paul. And so I think it was just this element of hooking them from the beginning, telling them what we were trying to do, but they don't know if we've done it yet. And then mentioning all these big names and then taking them through the process. And then the video, it was actually just a part one. So they didn't know what happened at the end of that video. So I think that it was also that kind of suspense.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah, a cliffhanger. Yep.
Nice. That's great. One of the other things that and I don't know how this fits in, but you also had the opportunity to design some billboards in Times Square. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that was another wild one. So that actually happened, and it wasn't like a school event. But during, again, I was vlogging and I was uploading all of these videos to my feed. And I ended up, I don't know if you heard about NFTs and like,
Mm-hmm.
that whole, so that's kind of, I ended up joining an NFT project that was by Gary Vaynerchuk. So the guy that I'd mentioned before. And I became a part of that community. And essentially, during that time, Discord, and it still is now, the Discord community was really big, right? And so what I ended up doing was I started really engaging with that community. And eventually I made friends with a few different people. And so one of them extended me the opportunity to essentially design these billboards because she had seen the work that I was doing. And this was in November. So, I'm still in class and she tells me if I want to do this. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, can I actually do this? Like, so eventually I jump on a call with the CEO and it's for a company called NFT NYC. And they are putting on this huge event in Times Square for talking about NFTs. And the event was basically I had 2 weeks to create these billboards. And they only had just a few concepts. And so he was like, is this something that you can do? And immediately I just remember feeling like, you know what, these past few years, because at that point, I think it was my sophomore year, I've been able to make all of these deadlines. I've been able to work for hours, sometimes losing sleep. I think I can do this. And eventually I did. I ended up, designing, I think it was like, so it was where they dropped the New Year's ball.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the Thomson Reuters and One Times Square. So it was about 6 different screens and like 3 different versions of the video, and all these assets. And like I'll be honest, it was really unorganized. But luckily at that time, I was in my animation production or my animation classes. And so I had learned everything about naming conventions and pipeline and how to organize. And so had I not had the experience from that class and I didn't have the support from my professors, which were shout out to Scott Raymond and Heather Abels, they are amazing. I would never have been able to do that. I just wouldn't have had the skills. And so, yeah, in 2 weeks time, I was able to knock it out. And again, it was kind of like the 24-hour animation. They had a deadline that they had to meet, but they kept bringing in other assets. So I was there basically until the time that it launched. And then they ended up flying me out to New York City in Times Square, and I got to see it right there. So
Holy cow.
it was incredible.
Have you said no to any challenge in life?
You know, I've made better boundaries now, but at the time, no, I was really just trying to take advantage of every single opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have no fear of things. I just am awed by you in your stories, because then one other thing that you mentioned is this a opportunity to have residency with the developers of and I know my son was involved. This is it? How do you say
Pokemon
Pokemon?
Go.
Okay.
Yeah, Pokemon Go. Yeah. Again, another wild one. And that happened a few months after the whole NFT NYC thing. So this was at the time I was really interested in augmented reality and virtual reality and um and I had the summer before worked on a summer research project for school. And I won a summer research grant, which is amazing. And I was able to upgrade my equipment, which because at the time I was working off of a laptop. So finally I was able to get a desktop and it was awesome. So I during winter break, there was a winter challenge that Niantic, the company, the developers of Pokemon Go, they were putting on to get developers to use their software, Lightship. So Lightship is a software to create augmented reality experiences, and it's the same software they used for Pokemon Go. So I thought to myself, why not? I'm not doing anything else. It's winter break, might as well. And that was what it was literally just me wanting to try it. I had never developed anything other than when I was working on my summer research project. But what I had realized is there's a lot of coding involved with VR. And so um, I I ended up doing augmented reality instead. So I thought, okay, well, I'm kind of familiar with the software because I worked on it on the summer. Let's just see. And so that's what I did. And again, I was just vlogging the process. So as I was using their software, I had this idea of coming up with like a kind of like a real world Mario. And so I went into Unity and I documented it, and I was able to create this experience where there was these coins, and it would actually react with the real world environment. So you're seeing these coins fall in my office, and they're bouncing off of my desk and the floor. And so someone from Niantic saw that video and they ended up reaching out to me and they said, hey, we're doing this residency in March. It's in the Hollywood Hills. You'll be here for a month and you'll be developing with Lightship software along with 10 other developers as a cohort. And I'm like, are you serious? And so, again, I was in class. And so I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. I'm in class, blah, blah, blah. And then, it all worked out. I ended up getting the permission to go. And that was another thing, was that the professors and the school in general, they were so flexible. I mean, if they had not said yes, then or I just wouldn't have been able to take advantage of that opportunity. But because I explained what I was doing, and we also had a lot of flexibility with working remote, then that opportunity was available to me. So
Yeah. Wow,
yeah.
that's awesome. And one other thing that I want to highlight during your time, and it was the study abroad, where you went to Italy, you went to Rome, and which is awesome. I think all students should be encouraged and explore that opportunity. Not only do you take that opportunity, but then you stayed for a longer period of time.
Yeah, that was so cool. So again, that I had wanted to go on study abroad before like COVID had happened. And then, all such as life, as we know how that all happened. And I didn't think that it was going to be available.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, an opportunity happened where there was an alumni, his name is Chris Sanderford, and he ended up creating this grant for veterans. And essentially you just had to submit an essay, explain what you wanted to do. And so I won, and I ended up going to Rome, all expenses paid, which was mind-blowing to me. And so, of course, the experience itself, learning about art history and seeing all those marvels was incredible. But it also, for me, I was born in Germany and I've never been back. And so I had my plan. My plan was I'm going to use it, the study abroad to get there, and then I'm going to figure out how to stay. I'm just going to figure it out. And so that was my plan. And a few days before we left, I went on Airbnb and I was looking at, okay, how am I going to do this? And of course I had some funds of my own and a credit card and all those things. And the day that they left, that same morning, I didn't find anything a few days out, but that morning, the perfect Airbnb became available, and it was in a little bit further away from where we were. It was more on the outskirts because I wanted to live like a Roman, right? And so that morning it became available. I had to extend my hotel for like an hour, and they were able to do that, and I was able to book it, and then I was able to go. And then I was there. I only had the Airbnb for 2 weeks, and I was also finishing up my my actual project for study abroad because we had to have that done by the end of the summer. And so I needed to work on that to create an augmented reality experience. And I ended up becoming friends with the host of the Airbnb. So she was really gracious and she let me stay for like an extra week.
Huh.
And then I found something called woofing, which it's a weird name, but it stands for Worldwide Organic Farms or something like that. And essentially what you do is you get to stay for free, free lodging, but you're helping and you're working on an organic farm.
Right.
And
Okay.
so
I've heard
for
of that.
me,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. For me, it was really like I loved being in the city, but I also love nature and I love being outdoors. So it was perfect because now I was able to leave the city central and then go out to the outskirts, and I was on this organic farm for almost a month. And basically just like live the life. I mean, it was a lot of hard work. I will say that. Like
Yeah.
the amount of work that you had to do on that farm, it was almost more than deployment. I mean, I have so much respect for them. And then from there, I ended up going to Germany and going back to Mainz, Germany, which is where I was born. And actually, I was literally born in the apartment. My dad was a medic in the military, and he delivered me in our apartment, and I was able to go back to that and like FaceTime them, and it was like amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Did
yeah,
and what's amazing about that, Shirley, is this idea that if you could go back in time and tell young Shirley, who's running around without any shoes on in Clarksville, that she would be in Europe figuring it out like
yeah,
you did. I
yeah.
mean, wouldn't she be amazed?
She would absolutely be amazed. She'd be like, "That's no, you're lying. You're lying." But at the same time, I feel like she would say, like, "I could see that. I could see that."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Any other things about Austin P that you remember that that we didn't? I mean, you've already mentioned some of the people that helped you along the way. Is there anybody else that students or faculty?
Yeah, I mean, for like faculty, I already mentioned like Heather and Scott, they were awesome. Jessica Fife was amazing. Billy, Fonstock, like there's so many professors that Laura Lee, like so all of them amazing. And then also for me, it was really the students. Like the students had a huge impact on me, and mainly because I was a decade older than they were. But I just realized that they were so self-aware. Like they really knew themselves in a way that I didn't know myself when I was their age.
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow, like how it's so cool how in tune they are and how incredibly talented they are. And so
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not gonna even lie. Sometimes I was intimidated by some of them, even with the experience that I had in life experience, just because of the fact that they were just so, again, just very self-aware and just like really like high emotional intelligence. And so I loved my experience at school. It was amazing. It's honestly one of the best decisions I've ever made.
So, one of the things we like to end our time with is sort of a opportunity for you to give some recommendations for Austin P students. What kind of recommendations might you have?
So I would say, for me, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but going back to school as an older person, at 28, I think really gave me, like, I knew what I didn't like, right? Because I remember before when I had applied in 2008, I applied for business. And, I'm so glad that I didn't take that route. And I ended up starting my own business in real life, right? And actually just experiencing that hands-on, but realizing that, oh, okay, art is really what I'm passionate about. And so having that kind of self-awareness and going back and just knowing exactly what I wanted, I think was really valuable. And also just like taking advantage of this time, of this opportunity, and realizing that it's temporary, Like you're only there for 4 years, most of us, right? We're only there for 4 years. And there's so many different opportunities at every corner. It's just a matter of finding them or creating them, right? Like what we did when we created the animation club. And we had our team to be able to work in the 24-hour animation contest. And people really want to help. Like people really want to support you. They want to advocate for you, and just remembering that it's temporary.
That's some great advice. And I'm so glad that you've been able to share this time and share your story here on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. This has been awesome.
And thanks to all of our listeners and viewers out there for checking out the podcast. We hope that you will continue to join us as we profile some of the outstanding alumni we have here in the College of Arts and Letters at Austin Peay State University. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and God bless.